the threat actors. Typically, I've seen in my career where nation states have been put under quite aggressive sanctions. So if you think of Iran, North Korea, they were using ransomware as effectively a currency stream to try and get income into their countries. We're also seeing a new type of NGO actor here, where some of you may be aware, AMD had an announcement made last week by a group called Ransom House saying, we know you've been subject to ransomware, we've acquired the data, we're making this public because you've put your corporate interests above telling your users that this has happened. So you're now getting these types of do-gooder type activities that we would have seen typically would have been associated with people like Anonymous in the past. So it shows you how the environment and the threat actors have a wide range of different interests, and the environment is consistently evolving. You know, we heard Stephen talk about how the ICO evolves around the tech environment, and the threat actor environment constantly evolves. And at some point there is a question if these tools will proliferate down to what we've called traditionally script kiddies, the 15-year-olds in their bedrooms who download these kits that become available through sites like 4chan, because it's the natural evolution of technology. It becomes dispersed as people want to share sometimes their achievements. Some of these guys are very proud of the code they've created and they want to shout about it. They don't want to hide in the shadows like Christian talked about. So it could become the tool of choice for bored teenagers, as we saw in the case of TokTok, when it was assumed at the time Dido Harding came out very publicly and said it's definitely a nation state, and lo and behold, it was a 15-year-old in his bedroom in Belfast. So it's these kind of evolutions that we need to keep looking for to understand how the threat will grow and change over the next months and years.
And what kind of weaknesses then are these adversaries exploiting? Excuse me. What, Christian, what kind of things are businesses not doing, or what are the weaknesses, what controls needed?
So in terms of actually how they're getting into those environments, the initial stage would be leaked access credentials. Those are typically on the deep and dark web. They've been leaked. They're out in the wild. Threat actors will look for these. If they can gain access into your environment utilizing that method, it's very easy, it's very cost effective. They don't need to purchase malware initially to get into that environment. If they can get in easily and then sell on that access, it's easy to get in, it's easy for them to make money. So firstly, we don't see a lot of companies actually participating in digital risk monitoring, which is essentially where your company is looking for their digital footprint. You want to see if actors are talking about your email addresses, your login credentials, if there's any passwords out there, if they're talking about your domain names, IP addresses. A lot of companies simply aren't doing that at the moment. So if you don't know exactly your digital footprint, what's out in the wild, what's there, you're essentially blind to the threat. So again, I would implore a lot of companies to go down that avenue, employ some kind of digital risk monitoring system. There's a plethora of different companies that do that, but you want to know exactly what's out there in regards to your organization. Another thing as well, I would say, a lot of companies don't necessarily understand the threat specifically to their organization or their sector. So information is out there about historical compromises against other organizations in their sector, about actors who target that particular sector as well. The better you understand that threat, the better you understand how those adversaries have targeted organizations in the past, then you can configure your cybersecurity controls accordingly. So knowing those threats is kind of the first stage to then adapting your controls accordingly.
Yeah. Antonis.
Yeah, thank you, Elena. And may I just sort of in an effort, given the title of a session, in an effort to adopt this wonderful intelligence overview that Christian just provided to the particular relevance that it has to the data protection officer or whoever is responsible for personal data within the organization. Because there's a temptation, and sometimes we see this in practice, where the data protection functions will say, well, this is not really my stuff, this is for the security team. And sometimes you see this kind of artificial distinction between responsibilities. But even if you take, as an example, a company that has a distinction between the two functions, and you have the data protection officer thinking, well, do I really need to know all that? The answer is yes, of course you do. Because just to pick up a couple of examples of what Christian was saying, as he was describing the prevalent modus operandi of the bad guys and girls, I've heard of at least 2 or 3 possible personal data breaches in the examples that you were describing. So you have leaked credentials in the wild, potentially. You have a compromise of the access point to begin with, and then you have potentially even a third party abusing credentials and accessing personal data on the network. So that's directly relevant to us when we're assessing things like severity of personal data breaches, notifiability, etc. That's point number one. The other point is, and I'm interested in your views, both of you gents, something we see quite a lot. Yes, we've seen examples of big game hunting, but it's actually a very small percentage of the work we do when it transpires after months that actually this company was targeted persistently and systematically by a sophisticated actor. 9 out of 10 times, it's entirely opportunistic why it was this particular client that ended up being breached, which again is very relevant to us as data protection practitioners, because obviously it's one thing if you can tell our good friends the regulators that we were subject to a sustained, sophisticated, targeted attack, and eventually we succumbed. That's one kind of failure. But basically being the one who was found out to lack in a random website sweep, and then you end up being compromised, is a completely different situation from a personal data point of view. So my key point is threat intelligence is absolutely essential in understanding the potential severity of a personal data breach.
I think it's, threat intelligence definitely has a role to play, but one of the things I would ask people to think about, my career, I've been in a big oil company which didn't hold a lot of PI, or personal information. I've been in a massive telco which was drowning and swimming in personal information. So what type of business are you in? Does that make you more attractive, less attractive? Sometimes, as we all know, we have people who make key decisions in businesses can be a bit dismissive of privacy, a bit dismissive of the security risk, because they've never had the big hack. This stuff happens to other people. And as a DPO, you have to be able to stand up and say with confidence why that's maybe not a fantastic strategy to protect the information going forward. But you have to avoid being sucked into suddenly it's your fault when it happens, that it's the DPO's fault that you didn't shout loud enough that you've been breached. But I would, as I say, I go back and question, does the nature of your business make you more susceptible and more attractive? If you're a successful FT20 company, does that mean you've got big funds? So you are going to be more attractive to, say, some of the Russian gangs, like Evilcore, who got a track record of going after big firms. Or you're a small company, it means you probably have less money to spend on cyber defensive, and it's going to be easier work. I think there's a variety of methodologies at play here, and you need to be able to work through them in your company as part of your risk assessment.
Thank you, and I look forward to hearing more later about what businesses can do to be the one that isn't targeted. Is it like a burglar might go to one house because there's no burglar alarm, but they won't go to the neighbour because they've got a burglar alarm? I'm curious about that. But so moving on to what an organisation can do. The IT guys, the InfoSec guys have said, oh, it looks like our data is on the dark web. What does an organisation do, and how does an organisation respond? Christian?
So several stages in the prevention side of things. Again, going back to digital risk monitoring, you want to know exactly what's out there in the wild in regards to your company. That information can get out there in a number of different ways. Primarily, you want to know if there's credentials, passwords, if actors are talking about your organization, your executives, your network, your domains, So having that kind of exposure on the deep and dark web, on encrypted social media apps as well, where these cyber criminals operate, typically you want to see that, you want to have a good level of visibility in regards to your company. And again, a lot of different services, but essentially you're configuring a number of rules in regards to your particular details, and you're looking for stuff that might occur in the future. So you want to have that level of visibility. Next, in terms of initial access, so again, good firewall protection. So we are seeing a move to more fileless techniques, but we are still seeing actors using traditional methods of entry. So whether that is kind of known malicious documents, phishing emails, known phishing campaigns, you want to have good visibility on that. You want to have good tools effectively to prevent that. And again, in terms of remediation, once the event has occurred, good incident response processes. So you want to know exactly what to do when an incident like that occurs, who should be involved, and more importantly, who shouldn't be involved, because again, that can cloud your remediation of the fact, and time is critical in that sense as well. And you want to have that set out in advance on the cybersecurity side as well, but also on the business side, whether that's legal, who do you bring in an emergency situation like that. So you want to have those processes ready to go in advance.